When I was preparing some documents after being nominated for the editorship of the journal, I was thinking about trying to reflect on the field and what I thought about what had been happening and how we might be able to move things forward. And I came to this realization. And the realization is that despite a quite heavy emphasis on theory in our field, we are frequently recycling very similar or in many cases the same types of views.
All of the work that we do, it's in an effort to improve coaching in organizations and to help people be better helpers to others. We had trained coaches who are practitioners who actually coached for us in the study. And so these individuals were really pivotal to us not only being able to get the research done and the data collected, but also to helping us add a level of ecological validity to what we're doing and something that's very hard science-based. We also work with practitioners and to share the results and to make sense of the results. We will go to executive education, we'll go to a cadre of coaches, and we'll share with them what we're finding in the science in hopes that it's going to impact practice. But we also find is that it's really interesting to understand what they find interesting. So those interpretations not only help us adjust what our interpretations are, but they also inform future research questions that we know will be grounded not only in the importance of scientific rigor, but also in relevance to what's happening in organizations.
So for my PhD, I collaborated with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development in Geneva, Switzerland. It was fundamental throughout my whole PhD, this close collaboration with a network of 200 businesses collaborating for sustainable development. It influenced the questions that I asked and the way that I see the theory. Each time I went to the field, I gained new insights and would go back and look at the theory and go back to the field, get more insights. So it really kept my energy going throughout the whole process and really allowed me to dig deeper into the theory than I would have ever been able to.
So there were two different roles for the practitioners in our study. So at the one hand side, they had a really critical role for our study because we were conducting an experiment where students had to discuss with representatives of firms as well as of NGOs. And so we were looking for partners in the practice for the firm side and for the NGO side. And we had to go and contact them and look for partners and so on. And actually, initially we planned to conduct the study only with actors and not real representatives, because we were thinking that the time of especially from the firm representatives would be too expensive and they wouldn't help us and stuff like that. But once we got in touch and they were really interested in the topic that we were after. We've met from partners from several companies that we were interested in collaborating with.
My study looks at how marginalized populations or stigmatized populations affect institution change. And the improved context in my study is how First Nations created casinos in the gambling industry in Canada. Because First Nation issues are very complicated, so I thought it was very important in the beginning of my study that I needed to get some insights from First Nation leaders. First Nation leaders that have been involved in affecting change for First Nation people. So I collaborated with a prominent Indigenous scholar at University of Alberta, and we got to know each other at a banquet dinner. Then after we got to know each other, we developed a strong personal connection, and now I'm his Chinese son, and he's my Indigenous mother, and I got to know her entire family, and we have dinner together, we hang together, and I visited her community. And so this collaboration has tremendously helped my research.
There are a lot of challenges in practitioner collaboration, and I could probably speak to that for a long time, so I'm going to stay specific to this study that I'm talking about here. And this study is a neuroscience study. So we're trying to make the translation between what's happening in the brain to behavior in organizations. And to make those leaps is a really difficult challenge in translation. So not only do we need to do justice to the science, we have to figure out a way to make it relevant to the workplace without oversimplifying it or without over-jargonizing it. So there's language that is available to both parties that we can, use to communicate. So that's one of the primary challenges. I think the second primary challenge in doing this kind of work and with practitioners is being in many ways bilingual, because even to get the work done, we have to speak the language of neuroscience. We have to speak the language of academic management and organizational behavior, and we also have to speak the language of practice. And any of those three parties have to be able to communicate. And so there's a little bit of an educational process that has to happen for everyone in being able to find a common language and a common understanding.
So the main challenge for me when I was working with practitioners was around the alignment of the outcome of the research, and I don't know if I necessarily overcame these challenges yet.
The difficulty there was kind of to really make to keep them on the topic, so to speak, because practitioners, once you get them to talk, they really start to talk about anything, and you have to make sure that you also get feedback on the stuff you really want to, because they have really limited time is running out really fast.
The biggest challenge I had when I collaborated with this international scholar is that she and her family focused pretty much on the practical side. So they focused on how they could affect real change for indigenous people, like how they could implement policies for indigenous people. But for me, my first goal is to have some contributions to literature. So I come from an academic background, and I often present them with academic manuscripts. And those manuscripts are very difficult for them to understand. They don't understand the concepts, and they think that, why are you talking about those terms? And these terms probably don't have any practical implications for First Nation people.
I think exposure is key. I mean, creating spaces where you can have conversation that isn't didactic, where it's not just a scientist imparting information, but instead it's a dialogue where you can clarify and where you can clear up interpretations. That's key. I think educational processes are key, but it can also be something as short as a single-day seminar where we're starting to exchange language.
If I were to do it again, I would start in the beginning, co-creating the research with practitioners. So right from the beginning, from the research question, trying to get alignment about what the outcome of the research should be.
The advice I would give is, on the one hand, you really want to make sure you get them to talk about what you want to maybe first, and then after that you could also make sure that you have enough time for them to talk about whatever is interesting to them, or maybe also like different insights you were not thinking of, because there's like a lot of potential where you initially didn't think about. Especially, I mean, scientists really have a really narrow focus. I mean, if you think about research questions, stuff like that. But there's so much potential that once you get into touch with practitioners, that you also get some different viewpoints, and maybe had to also other directions, or also for future research and so on. So there's a lot of potential that one should get into, one should take into account of. The NGO representatives, they were really concerned that that maybe the study was conducted such that the firms could, it would just be in a too positive light for the cooperation itself in a sense, and too not critical enough, for example. So there was also some, there was some talking to do to really convince them that there would be equal chances and so on, and it would be unbiased and it would be neutral and everything like that. So that was kind of tricky at the beginning when it was about to find partners.
I had to kind of involve myself more deeply in the discussions around First Nations. I went to the communities more often, and also I went to the conferences and discussions between indigenous scholars. And then over time I learned their language, And I found that actually when they talk about the practical implications, when talk about how we can actually affect real change, they actually borrow some insights from the work I do. And then over time, I learned how to translate my work into a language that they could understand and comment on.